would you turn off that rock music?
Hey, you don't have a stegosaurus, man.
These talking dinosaurs are more real than most real families on TV.
Look, Maggie, they have a baby, too.
It's like they saw our lives and put it right up on screen.
Honeys, we're home. Hello, and welcome to Sinclarity, a Dinosaur's Tale. This is episode 26, which I think there's an episode coming up too from now where we call it episode 26, but I was wrong. These things get out of hand sometimes. But I'm your host, Ben Hand Up Me, and I'm here with my co-host.
We're going to need another Timmy.
And guess what? We found another Timmy.
That's right. I'm leaving the show. Goodbye.
We're replacing our beloved Timmy with the original Timmy, Tim Doyle, writer from the show Dinosaurs, as well as many other things. He wore a lot of hats and still wears a lot of hats.
Yeah, he was basically involved in the writing for every single episode.
Yeah, from the beginning of the show. It was his first TV job, as you'll find out in the interview we have with him, which we're just going to segue into. He's not in here with us for the intro.
Yeah.
But we recorded that yesterday. We're recording the intro afterwards. We got this whole timeline messed up.
It's like the MCU.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Yeah, it's like the My Chemical Universe.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, Tim Doyle, other than Dinosaurs, he worked on shows like Roseanne, Still Standing, Ellen, Big Bang Theory. And I didn't say Bazinga a single time the whole interview, the whole time.
It's Zach's wife's favorite show.
Zach's wife's favorite show. And and then he also has a newer show like that's now on Hulu that was on ABC called The Kids Are All Right, which I've been watching lately, and it's really good. Yeah. It's kind of like Malcolm in the Middle meets The Wonder Years. I mean the show, not the pop punk band, The Wonder Years. It's They Might Be Giants meet The Wonder Years.
Yeah, but it's a really fun interview. We had a good time with Tim, and we got a lot of juicy details and information from Tim. So check it out. And we'll meet you at the end of this interview for the outro.
Yeah, we'll see you there. We're going to record it in like 5 seconds from now. But you're going to be an hour and a half in the future. So let's do it.
It's called magic.
That's cinema magic, baby.
I love the show. Like, I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
And I kind of got Ben into it because Ben wanted to do like a podcast with me. And I was like, what could we do that would be like, not just us sticking around, and I was like,
that no one else is doing.
Yeah.
Especially like
we could talk about Buffy. We could talk about Westworld.
I mean, a lot of these things come up anyway. Like, it's definitely a jumping off point because so many episodes bring up things that are still relevant or have become relevant tropes throughout media that like every episode, like our episodes are like an hour to an hour and a half long about a 20-minute TV show episode. So it's it's a good. I mean, we just talk a lot. That's probably what that really is. But
yeah.
Well, I always sort of look at social media for any references to the show, and every at least once a year, somebody writes an article somewhere about the final episode, about the decimation of the dinosaurs. Somebody writes an article where they kind of rediscover the show and say, hey, there was this cool show on when we were kids. Do anybody remember this? And I've seen like 7 different iterations of that article. And then periodically some meme will pop up where people say, hey, look, the baby looks like, Bill Barr.
Yeah. I got tagged in all of that stuff. Like,
so that stuff pops up, or I get, or somebody will do like a remix where Earl is, doing some rap song or something.
The Biggie Smalls one.
It's so good. Yeah, basically, Tim, I had watched the show when I was a kid a little bit. Like I was born in 1990. So there were VHSs in my house with like recordings of episodes, and like I vaguely remember the one about the flat Charlene proving the world was round, which I believe you
I
wrote.
wrote that one.
Yep.
Sure.
And I vaguely remembered one about like a quicksand, but the way we're doing the podcast is I just watch the episodes as we go, but Tim has seen the show multiple times over. Like,
Yeah.
so
Like I watched it originally, like when I was a kid, I would watch it. And then a few years ago, it was on Netflix and I started watching it. So I watched it all the way through on Netflix. And then it just kind of disappeared from my consciousness. And then they put it on Hulu and I watched it again all the way through. And then it disappeared. And then we started the podcast and then it was like, oh, it's coming to Disney Plus. I was like, oh, that's cool.
yeah, it was, the timing was wild because it was like maybe 15 episodes into our podcast. We saw a thing about Ryan Reynolds mentioning it was going to be on Disney Plus, but then everyone said that was a joke he made. So we started making fake memes about how Ryan Reynolds owes us the show.
Ben harassed Ryan Reynolds without Ryan Reynolds knowing.
There's no way he
harassed.
ever saw the memes. There's no way it reached his desk, but
No.
it was
Why
just a
would
bunch of jokes. Like I just took regular memes that already existed and changed it to be like, did you know that Ryan Reynolds lied about dinosaurs going on to Disney Plus? But then
So
I was
Ryan, you become Ryan Reynolds truthers.
yeah,
You're
exactly.
totally busting him for his deceit. Look, it's such an interesting show. It was my first job.
Mhm.
And for that reason, it was very special because, I had no previous experience working at TV, and working at such a high professional level. And this was an insanely expensive show too. So
Mhm.
my first job in television, it's like your first job in the movies, and you get it, and you're involved in a Marvel spectacular movie or something like that, as
Yeah.
opposed to shooting something in your garage. I mean, this was extremely expensive, extremely elaborate, and it was a huge job. And I was there from the beginning to the end. I mean, pretty much from the pilot all the way through the final episodes.
That's wild.
I hung in there. Various of my friends, kind of came and went, and I was like, no, you guys, this is cool. Also, I basically half suspected this would be the end of this would be the only job I'd ever have in TV, and my career would be over anyway at 3 years in. So I hung in there through the whole thing. And I mean, I guess what I'm just saying is, it's funny though, because I've worked on in one form or another like 30 or 40 shows over the last 30 years.
Yeah, like really big sitcoms too. Like Still Standing,
coming back.
like Still Standing starred like Robert Baratheon from Game of Thrones, which is wild.
Yeah. Oh, he's a great guy. What's his name?
He's a great actor.
Yeah. I just was watching him on. He's got a British detective show. He's
Bill Miller. Or Mark Addy.
Well, the character's name was Bill Miller, but it's Mark Addy.
Mark Addy.
Very nice man from Yorkshire who we worked with for 3 years on that show. But I mean, no show has had the resonance that Dinosaurs has had. And part of it is because it's children's broadcasting, or and so there's a whole generation now for whom my early career is your nostalgia. And that's always sort of a double boost, is like, oh, my children are watching this and they like it. And every couple of years the people say, write an article about how, oh, I watched this when I was a kid and now my kids are watching it, and I'm enjoying it on another level, which is always good. But it's just one of those things that just kind of keeps coming back. And I swear to God, I think we felt this way at the time. I remember the conversations we would have where among the other writers, where we kept saying, we are going to totally go to, we'll be like going to a pride parade, and there'll be a guy in a diaper on a float dancing to the dinosaur song, 30 years from now.
We can make that happen too.
I'm sure it has.
I mean, we at the time kind of felt like, oh, this is resonating, and we knew that it looked pretty good. I mean, unfortunately, the version that they're showing on Disney Plus hasn't been remastered and made to look as pretty as it could. But we shot on 35 millimeter film. As I recall, we even shot in the wider aspect ratio for with the idea that it could be shown in the future. And of course, they basically just went back to I think they took a VHS cassette and they just burned the
Yeah.
podcast version off of that.
They
Yeah,
ripped
but I
it
mean,
on there.
If Disney wanted to spend a nickel, they could go back and remaster the whole thing, and it would look pristine. It would look like it was produced yesterday. Because unless they threw out all that material, but we did it at the time with this idea that, we want this to be able to last.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like definitely the general puppet aesthetic helps give it longevity too, because it doesn't look the same as like an early 90s sitcom might not have the same resonance, because I mean the puppets will always be cool to look at, and like the way it was shot and the choreography, just like the blocking on the stage, like it's a lot of work and everyone can tell while watching it. Like I don't know, it's beautiful.
Well, everything was art directed, and also again, like any kind of period story, it's not locked in time. It's not like Seinfeld where he picks up the phone and it looks like a tennis shoe.
Yeah.
We had our own kind of telephone. There are certainly references and things that make it feel a little dated. There probably are slang phrases and expressions and things that that kind of lock it, but much less so than an episode of Who's the Boss or something like that.
Yeah, it definitely like there wasn't anything that felt super anachronistic other than intentionally so, with like the disconnect between which technology exists and which doesn't, which is really funny throughout it. You mentioned the types of phones. The first episode you were the listed as writer on Family Challenge. That one has the little gag about the rock phone commercial. Like, it's a rock and it's a phone.
Right. Yeah,
like
that was again, that's a reference to, they used to do those commercials for the football phone. If you go to Sports Illustrated, you can get a phone that looks like a football. And that one that one probably might soar over people's heads because there's nothing quite like that at the moment. But it still stands on its own goofy little legs. So as like, what is this? This silly guy is excited about a phone that looks like a rock.
Yeah, it was also prescient in the sense that like not too long after that there'd be commercials of like your phone is also a camera. Like phones became this thing that, like, if somebody holds up their like phone to me, the last thing I think of is that it's a phone. Like it does everything else in the world first.
It's a supercomputer in your pocket, which again we did not have when in 1991 or whatever when the show premiered. That was new. I remember seeing somebody with a an early flip phone in the elevator, or like the 3 years into the show's run, an agent was coming and he visited. He had a little flip phone. Hello, and I'm like, wow, guys from outer space.
That was when people would get made fun of for having cell phones. Like, oh, nice business exec over here, real busy. He's got a cell phone on him.
Yeah.
No, Mr. Important. I remember seeing a guy. He had like a briefcase size thing, and it started ringing. He's like, "Excuse me, I have to take this." Put it over, plug the thing out with a cord on it. Yes, hello. Sorry, very important guy here who walks around with a briefcase so that he can talk on the phone, so he doesn't have to put a dime in a phone booth.
Yeah.
Well, there is an episode, but I don't know. I don't think you were involved, Tim, but there was the episode with Fran Live where there's a guy who.
Remember, I was there for all of them. I just didn't have my name on all of them.
Yeah. I was going to ask about that later.
Writers write everything, so I'll certainly remember the ones that I wrote the drafts for probably a little better. But yes, I remember Fran. She gets a job on a radio station.
Yeah, and the guy calls on his cell phone. He's like, "I'm on my cell phone right now and about to jump off the bridge." So I was like, okay, so they do have cell phones.
Yeah, I mean they existed since the late 80s, just not in the same way, I don't think, right?
No, they weren't ubiquitous. But I mean, in Hollywood, I think they cropped up a tiny bit earlier than they probably did, in other places. But yes, it was. I mean, there were all sorts of things like that were different then than are now. But again, the dinosaur world had their version of things, but we're not looking at, you're not looking at an old dumb computer sitting on somebody's desk in a scene and realizing, oh, look at that, that whatever little Apple computer from, or something, there's nothing in the show that really gives it away. So, I mean, like The Simpsons or something like that, also because the characters don't age, obviously they're plastic. So, the show could conceivably play fresh to audiences, indefinitely.
Yeah, that was Simpsons always listed as a rule that they try to not tie anything to a year while doing the show. Like there's occasional ones like in the Khan versus Kodos election, they make direct references like the Bob Dole election and shit like that. But like Mostly like a lot of shows like Simpsons, Dinosaurs, it makes sense because they don't have people visibly aging in front of you while you're watching it.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah,
No,
it's easy
perfect.
to.
And the
have it stand
references,
out.
yes, the references are cool. Now, again, look, when you're doing TV, you're not really sitting there saying, well, we want the legacy of this show to be able to be shown 30, 40, 50 years hence. No, you're just trying to survive. You're just trying to get the show out and not get canceled. But I did always feel like my wife wrote briefly on Murphy Brown, and I would read the scripts and it would be like, oh, here's a joke about Jimmy Carter's brother Billy, or something. And you're like, is this joke about Earl Butts in a hot tub? Is this joke going to be anything that anyone's going to understand even 2 years from now, let alone 20 years from now?
Didn't they also do a thing with was it Dan Quayle?
What, on Murphy Brown?
Yeah,
they got into a big fight. Candice Bergen or Diane English or somebody who ran the show got into a big fight with Dan Quayle, who was the vice president at the time. And they made a lot of jokes about how stupid he was because he famously didn't know how to spell potatoes. I think.
I think about this a lot.
He corrected a kid in a classroom that the spelling of potatoes, and ended up looking like a doofus. So they went to town on that. Oh no, but the fight was about. Dan Quayle then criticized the show because Murphy Brown had a child out of wedlock. And it became one of those things of like, Hollywood values of promiscuity. I believe in the American family, and I don't believe in TV shows that tell people that it's all A-okay to have sex, randomly and just produce children helter-skelter.
My friend, one of my oldest friends, his dad ended up being an extra on an episode of Murphy Brown, and he like kept the tape for years, and he would tell everybody, he's like, I was on Murphy Brown, you want to see me?
Sure. He's in the background in a restaurant scene.
He's just there. Yeah.
That's great.
It's hilarious.
Hey, it's showbiz, man. I mean, show business is this weird thing of like getting in, staying in, hanging on, and trying to figure out how to make money at the same time. It's a very strange life, especially for actors. I mean, the world is so competitive. There's so many people, trying to get that handful of jobs. I started out trying to be an actor. I did a decent amount of work when I was a kid. I did like TV commercials and stuff. I was a funny, goofy kid behind the counter at McDonald's and like 40 commercials when I was like 19 or 20. But at a certain point it was like, oh, you have to sit here at home doing nothing, waiting for the phone to ring, hoping that you get enough of these jobs in a year so that you can pay your rent.
Mm-hmm.
And and so I continued to pursue other things and ended up writing.
So how did you get hired for Dinosaurs?
I had just come out of one of the things I did while I was coming out of acting. I was a kid and I was ambitious. You should watch my TV show.
I have.
The kids are all right.
Yeah, I'm I think 15 episodes in right now.
Okay, good.
It's very good. It's very good, by the way. I like it a lot. All the characters, all the brothers, like everyone has such a great personality. The actors do it all so well that I'm enjoying it a lot. Like the Frank character is really funny to watch.
Frank's great. Caleb is a wonderful actor. But that show is a stylized representation of my childhood. I grew up in, Irish Catholic kid in Glendale, California, which is surrounded by Hollywood. It's like Burbank on one side and Hollywood over here. We all knew people who worked in the industry, but I, and I was dying to be in this industry. I couldn't figure out how to do it. My dad, wasn't associated with it. I didn't have any relatives who were in it, and I was just desperate. So like Timmy, the character in the show, I was pulling out all the stops trying to get myself somehow into the business. And I did plays at little theaters, and I tried to get an agent and all that stuff. And eventually around 19, things started to kind of happen for me. I started to get a little bit of work. And, but even then, after, doing plays, writing plays, directing plays in these little theaters, I could see that I was headed nowhere. So I went to film school. I signed up. I was out of college for a couple of years, but I went to USC Film School. I applied and was accepted. I had decent enough grades. And after 6 years of film school, undergrad and graduate, I did a student film that had a very good screening. I wrote and directed a comedy film, a little short 20-minute comedy, and that sort of launched me, and that led to me getting the job on Dinosaurs.
Was that the Zombie High movie, or is that
No, I did write Zombie. Oh, you looked at my IMDb.
Oh yeah, no, I researched.
I co-wrote Zombie High, which is a debacle. It used to be on Netflix. You used to be able to find it. I don't know where it is anymore. Starring what's her name? I've got the poster over there on my wall. But I wrote that in film school, and it was shot on the campus at USC. But
Paul Feig was in it.
Paul Feig, yeah, that's where it was from. Paul.
Virginia Madsen.
Virginia Madsen was the star, yeah. Sherilyn Fenn. But anyway, yeah, I made a little 20. They have, the student films. I wrote and directed a little funny, little 20-minute comedy that screened very, very well at the annual student screening, and that led to Disney approaching me about a very low-level TV writing fellowship working for the Disney company. And within about 2 or 3 months, they sent me to Michael Jacobs and Bob Young, who were starting this new show, Dinosaurs. And so I came in as a low-level writer. I don't even think I have a credit in the first couple of episodes of Dinosaurs, because I wasn't even like covered by the Writers Guild. And then at a certain point, I think they made up a fake credit for me as like staff advisor or something for the first few episodes, like just so I could have my name on the screen with everybody else. But I started working on this show. They set me up with Michael and Bob, who were the writers on the show. Jim Henson sort of gets credited with the show, but it was his like initial inspiration. But Jim was dead a year before anything regarding the show, really happened. His son Brian was involved, definitely, and the Jim Henson Creature Shop, all the puppeteers that have a huge background with the Muppets and all that, and the people and the Creature Shop, the people who designed all those characters for the Dark Crystal and the movies and the various movies they did, and they had just come off of doing the characters, the suits for the Ninja Turtle movies. They had just done the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies. Again, it wasn't their production; they just were hired as a practical effects firm to design the characters and to make them operate. And that was the technology. They said, "This is a cool technology. We have this thing of like a person in a costume with a computer on their head, and remote control eyes and mouths and facial expressions that we used for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff." And, the Hensons had spent a lot of time and money working out this technology, and they were looking for another opportunity to use it. Yeah. So that was, that plus Disney had just bought, the Henson Company, and they were looking for, some value in that. So it all kind of came together that way, which was we have to find a way to use, this Henson stuff somehow. But they brought in these sitcom guys, Michael Jacobs, who had done Charles in Charge and My Two Dads. Those were his credits. And then he went on to do Boy Meets World. Yeah, which was my favorite as a kid was Boy Meets World. Yeah, well, Michael, that's Michael's true heart there. That's those stories about a kid and his family and his friends and stuff. That was kind of really sort of the core of what of Michael's taste. And he kind of went off to do Boy Meets World at a certain point while we were still doing Dinosaurs. And so his writing partner on Dinosaurs, Bob Young, was running the show pretty much for the last 2 years, I think, of the show. While Michael was he did the Torkelsons and he did Boy Meets World while we were still doing Dinosaurs. But, there was this fusion of sort of traditional sitcom sensibility from Michael and Bob, and this sort of Muppet sensibility from the Henson people that kind of fused, I thought, very nicely in the Dinosaurs thing. And it didn't really feel like the Muppets, and it didn't really feel like a traditional sitcom. We kept sort of making fun of traditional sitcoms and kind of really kind of going at them. Almost from day one. Yeah, we didn't record it, but it's the next one we're going to record is the one where they find the weed, the plant. So it's the very special episode of sitcoms. Yes,
so
and
great.
don't we have a thing at the end where Robbie is like sitting in a director's chair and he turns the camera? I remember writing that little bit. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
hi, I'm Robbie Sinclair, but you know me as Robbie Sinclair from Dinosaurs or whatever.
So
What's great with that is also his plea is like, please quit using drugs so we can stop having these heavy-handed endings to sitcoms. Like,
Yeah, look at this. We're doing one now. We're only in our first season.
yeah.
uh,
That's good.
what
Yeah,
do you
because again, Michael and Bob had written those kinds of episodes for other shows. You know, Bob Young had written on like Facts of Life and stuff. So these guys had come from this background of very conventional sitcoms, and this show kind of freed them up to bite the hand that feeds them a little bit and to sort of make fun of that stuff. And Bob especially was very eager for those opportunities. Plus the writing staff, it was other than those guys, it was a young writing staff of people who were fairly new. I mean, it was my first job, and some of the other folks there, Rob Hewlin and Victor Fresco and Dave Kaplan and stuff. They were fairly new writers at the time, and and we all had this deep envy of The Simpsons. You know, Rob Hewlin went to Harvard and was friends with a lot of the Simpsons dudes, and we sort of interacted with Mike Reese or Al Jean and Mike Reese and Jeff Martin and some we knew these guys from around, and they were doing this super cool show where they could do anything.
Yeah.
And that was the sort of the gold standard. So our inclination among the writers on the writing staff was to keep pushing the show in a Simpsons direction.
Was the joke on the Simpsons episode, was that just between friends, like when they were making fun of him?
Yes,
what I'm
it
talking
kind
about?
of was. I mean,
Yeah.
it kind of was. I think it was, it was well intentioned, but the Simpsons were also experiencing a lot of that. It's like, because there were a couple of other shows that also kind of like, oh, look at the Simpsons, we'll do. There was like a cartoon show called Capital Critters, where that one of the other channels like CBS or NBC or something had put on, which was going to be their answer to The Simpsons. And then there was another show with fish, and I mean, there were a number, and again, anytime something succeeds, network television sort of goes after it.
Oh yeah, you can always see the following season of TV. There's like 8 clones of whatever was big the year before. Oh yeah, it's always interesting.
Yeah, no, we're going to have a million soap operas, nighttime soap operas with the word "us" in the title. Yeah. I mean, it's not an exaggeration. I mean, every year, something pops and succeeds unexpectedly, and then the massively uncreative, former MBAs, who run network television, they keep trying to break down success to some kind of replicable elements. It's like, well, it's this DP lit it a certain way, and this guy, the music on it sounds like this, and it's set in this, it's set in Cincinnati. We need to do a show set in Cincinnati, Ohio. I mean, they don't know how to recognize excellence or good storytelling or whatever. All they know is elements. And so when something happens that they didn't count on, and they're all frantic for their jobs and always on the verge of getting fired, they scramble to copy, something. And that was the same. So for a few years, The Simpsons was being copied left and right, and we were the only thing, I think, that was even in that ballpark that was at all successful.
Mm-hmm. When they brought you in, like, did they kind of have like a general direction or idea that they wanted to do with the show, like besides trying to do like a Simpsons-y thing? Like, was there like a world or whatever that you wanted to establish or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, look, Michael and Bob are smart writers. They've been around for a while, and they had a plan in place. My point is that I feel like then they hired some pretty good writers, and we kind of helped shape that plan. Again, Michael's sensibility was very much telling those heartwarming family stories that he ultimately ended up telling on Boy Meets World. And he, again, one of the great things you can't fake as a TV writer is really believing that stuff. And Michael is a guy who, really is just, he's got a big heart, and he really believes that, hey, the relationship between a father and a son is the most important thing on the earth, or whatever. These speechy little things that you get at the end of episodes, some of us who are cynical and kind of like, wanted to flip our middle finger at television tropes, we would kind of roll our eyes. But Michael, he had a big heart. So they were intent on making a show about the dinosaur family and do a family show, that just happened to be about dinosaurs. But, Michael also has this funny sensibility of, the premise of the show when they first did it was that this was the first generation of dinosaurs to live a domestic life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Previous to this, they'd wandered around and migrated, and the invention of the refrigerator allowed them. They put very funny episode written almost entirely by my friend Victor Fresco. Again, a very talented writer who's gone on to a great career. You might be familiar with the Santa Clarita Diet, which was his most recent show he did on Netflix. I worked with him on Andy Richter Controls the Universe.
Oh, that show's awesome.
Great show. And Better Off Ted, which is a wonderful show, canceled before its time. Victor's got a great sort of dry comedic voice. But anyway, yes, but the idea in Michael's head was the first generation that settled down into domestic life and how much that sucks for the man. Michael had that kind of comic impulse, which was, families are wonderful, but the dad gets the short end of the stick. He's got to pay for everything, and he gets his balls busted nonstop by the wife and kids. And that was the premise of the show. To start with, and Michael had that sensibility, and they could easily have, gotten a bunch of episodes out of that. But then what happens is you get into a room with, 10 creative people talking, and everybody throws in ideas, and there were lots of different things to help shape the stories that we told. The first time for anything, right? So the first time they find, the first time they discover drugs, the first time, the Hurling Day episode was like, traditionally, dinosaurs migrated and they couldn't afford to be slowed down by old people, so they would throw them into the tar pit.
Was there any historical basis for the age being 72? Because I think the movie Midsummer that came out like a few years ago, the horror movie, old people get thrown off a cliff at age 72 in that movie.
Well, believe me, we should too. No, absolutely. We should absolutely see. Somebody pointed that out to me. I didn't make it all the way through Midsummer. I was too upset by it. I went with my daughter, and then I walked out and ate popcorn in the lobby for 20 minutes. It
was hard to watch.
So I didn't. I would not be surprised if they got the idea from us. I mean, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they get the idea from us? Even consciously, But
we thought that was hilarious, and we're sometimes when we record, we try and like do world building, and we'll try to be like, oh. So I feel like the way you're explaining it, we've kind of caught on to all those that you're like all those. The things that you mentioned, like the first this and the first that. So it's good to know that we're getting a good understanding of what's going on.
And that was the initial impulse that Michael and Bob had, I think, was we're going to do a lot of those kind of episodes. And then I'm saying these other writers came in and said, hey, we don't like the Gulf War that we're getting into. We think this stuff is bullshit. Let's do a story about the dinosaurs going to war over pistachio nuts.
That episode's coming up.
Yeah, we're gonna do that one soon.
Yeah, and stuff. I mean, we started reacting to more sort of political stuff, and then another writer joined the group, a guy named Andy Goodman, who was very involved in environmental politics. And it was always part of the initial concept that Jim Henson discussed was the idea that the dinosaurs sort of died off because they bespoiled their universe. That they were bad stewards of the environment, and they lived a selfish lifestyle. I think it was all based on originally based on, I think, a Gary Larson cartoon that showed like dinosaurs sitting around smoking and drinking beer, and then said, the reason the dinosaurs died off or something was like that was, I swear, I think it was all cribbed from that, and Henson liked that idea a lot. So that was always kind of baked into the show. But Andy Goodman was involved in a group called the Environmental Media Association. And so he kind of pushed us and inspired us to do a lot of episodes about the environment.
Yeah, we just did Power Erupts, I believe was Andy Goodman. Power Erupts, absolutely. Or whatever. The one where the Superdome, Biodome thing. Yeah,
a ton of those ideas. And again, but once we started kicking this stuff around, we saw how fruitful it was. We would do it again and again, and keep going back. Or you'd have a small bit in one episode like that. Like the Happy Plant kind of came out of, we did that episode very early on where Robbie flirts with being an herbivore.
Yeah. Okay.
What a wild episode.
Okay, so you were in the room, of course, for that. Was there like an initial pitch for that episode? Do you remember like
the herbivore one?
Yeah. I don't remember sort of verbatim exactly what came of it, but we were. One of the things that we did, and the way I got the job on the show was, I had to go in and pitch to them. I had to go in and talk to them about ideas. And one of the things I latched onto was like, animal things that animals have that humans don't have, that might be funny to see a human-like creature do. So one of my first pitches to them was the mating dance. That the animals do a mating dance in order to attract their mates. Humans don't really do that per se. So and we thought that would be funny to see the big puppet do a dance, and believe me, the mating dance episode, developed a lot from my initial pitch. But I had to go in I came in with like a yellow legal pad with like 50 things that animals did. They lose their tails. They shed. They lay eggs. I literally, I think, went to the LA Zoo and looked at various animals and thought about like their behaviors and stuff, because I wanted this job. And that was a welcome element that I brought to the show, was this initial interest in what makes animals different from humans.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of episodes with that sort of as the starting off point. So the herbivore thing was like, some animals, are herbivores and some are carnivores. And old school Earl, of course, is going to think that it's wussy to be an herbivore.
Yeah.
He calls him Herbo.
Yeah, we did the herbivore bar, but in the course of the story, herbivore thing kept shifting. It was like, is herbivore a metaphor for gay? Is herbivore vegetarianism?
Yeah.
And then the bag of broccoli.
And then he goes into the boy's bedroom and in his sock drawer he finds some carrot sticks or something.
Broccoli,
Yes, and suddenly it becomes herbivore. Being an herbivore is comparable to like drug use, and I think that's where the Happy Plant episode spun off of that. It's like that amused us so much, the idea that Robbie would, that the dad would be worried about Robbie using some illicit drug, that we came up with the Happy Plant thing. You get a few laughs with something small that's like a single joke, and then you blow on those embers a little bit and see if you can get a whole fire out of it. And I think that's where the Happy Plant came from. Was we enjoyed so much the broccoli in the sock drawer part of it.
Yeah.
Robbie.
Sorry, Ben. Were you gonna say something?
You can go on.
Oh, when we did the Herbo episode, we had our friend who is vegan and straight edge watch the episode with us, and he wasn't super familiar with the show, and he was so confused. He didn't know what direction the episode was going in, and he thought we were making fun of him, but we weren't making fun of him. We were like, no, we're not making fun of you. It's just like, this is just the episode that we wanted you to record with us. But he had like no idea. He was so confused how it kept changing. The metaphor kept changing.
Right. And again,
that's fun.
That's the great thing about sort of network television. I mean, as opposed to nowadays where, you do a show for a streaming service and you do 6 or 8 or 10 episodes. It's like when you're doing a network show, you have to be ready to do 24 episodes in the course of a year. 22, 23, if the show is successful on network TV, you at a minimum get 22 episodes. And so it's a moving train, and there wasn't a tremendous amount of prior planning. We didn't, they didn't go into the season with a ton of episodes already thought out.
Mm-hmm.
We were this machinery that had to generate ideas. So basically whatever's funny seems to go, and we're not married to consistency or internal logic whatsoever. But I got to say, the herbivore episode, like most of our episodes, I think we ended up in a fairly sympathetic place to herbivores. We didn't like shit on them at the end. I think ultimately Robbie, ends up, enjoying eating creatures again. But we didn't like say these people are assholes. And there was the LA Times TV critic at the time. What was his name? He was great, very good TV critic. He became a big fan of the show and a big supporter of the show, specifically because of that episode, because he was a vegetarian, and it amused him to no end. And so he started writing very complimentary pieces about our show. What was his name? God, it was a great guy. But I mean, he's one of the reasons that the show, made it for 3 seasons, because he kept writing very smart pieces about us in the local paper, which everybody in the industry reads.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, and it was specifically because of that vegetarianism episode, which he felt was very supportive.
For the development of Baby, because we talk a lot about the baby and how like the baby pretty much became like the Urkel, like he had like catchphrases and stuff like that. Oh, yeah. Was that something that just came like organically, or did you guys think like we need?
I got one of those. I'm the baby. I'm the baby. Gotta love me.
My hand does not fit in this puppet like almost at all. Like
I have the. These
Tim has those.
Yeah, what do you call them? The pop.
Yeah.
I've got complete collections, but I have a ton of other stuff. I mean, I have original stuff from back in the day, but it's mostly in my storage place. Oh, look at that
pillowcase.
I would
a lot.
when the again, we thought the show was going to have some value, so we ran out to Toys R Us and bought shit when it came out.
Yeah,
and stuffed it in our closets. You're thinking, but the baby thing, Michael Jacobs, again, having come off of these shows, My Two Dads and Charles in Charge, he was very much aware of all that kind of cultural stuff. He on Boy Meets World, he put those kids on the cover of Tiger Beat magazine or whatever, and he was very tuned into, you got to have a catchphrase. You got to have recurring characters that the kids will get excited about. You got to have a breakout, and I think from day one, he was like, the babies are Fonzie. The babies are Fonzie. We got to, push the baby.
I believe he had a baby like right before the show, didn't he? Or was that Bob Young? Or it was him?
Well, okay. I think they both had young kids at the time. Bob's kid was born like right before one of his kids was born right before the show. But yeah, they were both guys in their 30s who had just got, who were just having kids. And so all of that like kid stuff was very close to them. The younger writers on the staff were still years away from, making babies or anything.
Yeah.
But Bob was very tuned into that kind of stuff. And as I recall, we shot the pilot, and then he and the big brains at Disney were looking at the pilot, and they said, the baby didn't appear in the pilot until like 10 minutes in or something. The baby was born, and they went back and said, you got to put the baby in the first frames of the show. We need that baby right up front. And so they shot a wraparound, I think, which still exists in the show, which is, Daddy, tell me a story about myself. Where did I come from?
Mm-hmm.
Well, baby, the stork brought you, and here's the story. He recognized almost instantly that the baby was the thing that was going to hook, little kids. And we always made fun of him for that. We were like, we didn't want to write a show about the stupid, and we refer the baby internally with a lot of hostility, as the adorable cuddle bunny, because we wanted to write The Simpsons or whatever. We wanted to write sort of the satire, And we ended up having to allocate, real estate every week to, the baby gets his thumb stuck in a jar.
Yep.
This is what do I do here? We had
You can tell in a lot of episodes where he'll just be in like the first scene, and then he won't really be a part of the story at all.
It doesn't reflect the plot in any way sometimes.
No, it was always a thing, and it was something that Bob and Michael ended up policing a lot. Was we would write the stories, and the baby would have nothing, and then we would have to go back and add a bit where the baby is is doing some silly thing, and gets a lot of the comedy. But I mean, we also worked with the baby. I wrote an episode with Kirk Thatcher, When Food Goes Bad.
Oh, that was a good one.
You were Chow, weren't you?
And I was General Chow.
Yes.
That's awesome.
From the refrigerator. So, Charlene, so good of you to come to my little.
Oh, so great.
I love it.
He was, because I did the voice in the room when I was pitching it, and everybody thought my James Bond villain voice was amusing. So I
Chow
got
the delicious.
Yeah, so I got Chow the delicious. So we used it. I mean, it's like if you could center a story on the baby and still have some fun. I also wrote The Terrible Twos, which was a parody of The Exorcist.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, we're gonna make fun of The Exorcist, and the baby spins his head all the way around, green slop and stuff. I mean, look, we knew where our bread was buttered, and part of the thing we realized very quickly was, as long as we had that baby content and we looked enough like a children's show, the suits in Burbank backed way off and kind of let us do our thing. Again, I'm surprised to this day the kind of stuff we got away with ultimately. In terms of politics and things, because they were happy enough with what we were doing, and they weren't getting a lot of complaints because people weren't watching the show seriously, or adults weren't watching the show. They were just putting it on TV and propping their kids in front of it. So nobody was complaining about the fact that we were making fun of Ronald Reagan or George Bush or whatever.
The episode where what sexual harassment,
Sure.
which
one of my favorite episodes.
When we talk about that episode in our episode of it, it seems to be reflecting the Clarence Thomas and
yes, of course.
Okay, I was making sure I was on with that because the timing, I was like, this has to be what it's about, and the fact that it didn't pull any punches at the end and she doesn't get her job back and it doesn't go, because that's what would have happened too, is she wouldn't have, in that male dominated society, that's how it plays out, and it's sad, but it's what happens. And there's a little spark of Charlene does the science fair project with the cube solar system for some reason. Some episodes there's a
Charlene's Flat World, sure.
Sometimes it's square. It's funny.
Charlene's Flat World, which I also wrote, I think. But the Clarence Thomas one is crazy. That's probably one of the ones that is in the most dated, in the sense that you're not going to get the full benefit of it unless you're familiar with the Clarence Thomas hearings. And we literally, in those, in that sexual harassment hearing thing, we had hand puppets in there doing versions of existing senators. We were doing an SNL bit. There. That one was our most specific and timely one. And I think what ended up happening too is we generated that one pretty quickly. It's as I recall, we were working on another episode, and Michael Jacobs came running in the shower. He'd had this idea this morning. He was watching the Clarence Thomas hearings, and he came running in and he said, "Forget it, fuck that one, throw that one out. We're going to do this one." What sexual harassment? Because his name is Harris. And his nickname is Sexual Harris because he says a lot of sexual stuff.
He invented double entendres.
His hilarious double entendres, which were painfully obvious, and which was part of the fun. We got Jason Alexander did that voice. Alexander Seinfeld, he was the voice. But we threw that one together pretty quickly based on Michael getting very excited about the idea. Again, initially I think Michael Jacobs was kind of leery of all the politics we were doing and all the kind of oh, what is this? Why are we doing this? This is a kid's show. Get the baby in there. Why is the baby in this episode? And then at a certain point, he saw that what we were doing was working. So he got completely on board. And it really was a great collaboration in that sense. We had these people who were kind of pulling the show in different directions, who ultimately kind of all landed in the same place where, this show can be this show can be that. It can have all these elements, give the baby a butterfly net, let him chase a moth around the kitchen or something. But, but at the end of the day, we're going to take on the We Say So Corporation and talk about all this bad stuff. And I'm telling you, it's like, you would never be able to have that content on ABC right now.
Oh
No way.
It's amazing to me how much more conservative network television has become, because there's so much more
it's a pushback is what it is against like people having more equal rights afforded to them. Is there's this like weird alt-right pushback to that whenever that happens. It feels like a backlash.
Well, but also social media is such a big deal now. It's like the fact that we were able to do an episode, those kinds of episodes, and it went by without comment. They would, there would be an occasional letter of like, how dare you? I put my child in front of the show and we saw an episode about sexual harassment. I had to explain to my child what sexual harassment was. We would get, 2 letters or something like that. But if you did that now, Twitter would light up with people saying, whatever, the show is part of a lefty conspiracy to destroy America and enslave children and put them in, and sex traffic with them.
The George Dinosaurus funded dinosaurs.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm telling you, and we got a little bit of stuff from the Parents Television Council or somebody like that would come and complain to us once in a while. We did a joke about Scientology, and we got a few.
Oh, that commercial is great.
It's so good.
We did a few. We got a few like threatening emails, or I don't know. No, the emails didn't exist then. We got a couple of threatening phone calls or something. I think.
Yeah.
I remember the writer on that one, Dava. She was very nervous about it, and she was unhappy that because she didn't write that particular bit, and she was very unhappy that we stuck it into her episode because now the Scientology people were basically going to put a snake in her mailbox or something.
Yeah, that was the Charlene's Tale episode. It was the commercial, The Science of Selling Books or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Why do you sell more books than me? That was very good.
We loved it. I mean, if you had a bug up your ass about anything, it was a great show for that, because you had your story, but like Family Guy or something like that, if you wanted to comment on anything else in the culture, you could have a little quick departure and you go on down a little side trip. And we always started scenes, or almost always started scenes, with the family watching TV. The TV was almost always on in the kitchen and in the living room. And so we would have, if there was anything that we wanted to make fun of, wanted to give some shit to, you'd come in and you pitch it. And so the TV bits were always totally fair game. One of our competitors, I remember, was Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah, it sums up.
we just recorded that one with our friend.
Which episode was that?
It's the Ethel. The
Ethel, where Ethel dies. Yeah.
Last temptation of Ethel. And I remember, but we went after Unsolved Mysteries. I think more than once.
They were the same.
We had a guy in a trench coat in the fog. Talking about the mysteries.
Charlene came into the room coughing when she answered the door because the fog.
Because there was so much fog from the TV.
So good.
No, I know, but I mean, that was all just pure spite on our part. I mean, if we were mad about something on the news or in our lives or whatever, and we wanted to make a quick jab at it, the writers could do it. It was a great sort of free-form place to have those opportunities. Again, a very, a wonderful creative experience for me for my first job, and it spoiled me for the work I did after that, because, I mean, I worked on some very good shows and I had some really good experiences, but the format of Dinosaurs was just so flexible that you could do almost anything, and any creative energy you had that you brought into that writer's room, could be utilized if you could talk the bosses into going with it. Which is just not the case when you're writing, even a show like Roseanne or something like that. You can't. The politics of the stories you can tell and the stories you can't tell is just so much more complex. Big Bang Theory or something. It's like, the number of times Chuck Lorre looked at me like, "You're a fucking idiot," when I would pitch something really out there on Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, I know. It says you've written a few like teleplays and stories. What's the difference when there's episodes that you'll be credited as writing the teleplay, but somebody else will be credited as the writer? What's the difference in that?
I think a lot of the time those are episodes that were group written, and they literally just kind of went eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and divided they felt like, well, wait a minute, Doyle hasn't, had one for a while. We need to give him some of the money. I mean, I don't know what the the pay was back then for a script, but it's a lot. I mean, to have your name on the script as a writer, the guild sets minimums for that. And I think when I started, it was like $20,000 or something like that. So it was a big deal when the boss would say, okay, Doyle, you're going to write this one. It'd be like, woohoo, I just made $20,000. Whether because you write the draft and you bring it back in the room, and the group rewrites the draft and fixes it, make sure it doesn't suck. So everybody would go off and write would write drafts, and then you'd come back, you'd get a fat check for $20K, and then the group would rewrite it anyway. So there was always this sort of, at least on that show and on a lot of most of the shows I've worked on, there was a sense of fairness of like, hey, Rob Yulin has gotten to write 4 episodes this season, and this guy only got to write 2. We should at least put his name on this episode, or give him a shared credit on this episode that we wrote quickly together as a group, as opposed, that kind of thing. So it's almost means, those credits almost mean nothing, at least on the shows I've worked on. It's just the boss sort of divvying up money in a way to try to be fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, on that show, like most shows, it's like the written by credit means usually that the writer went off and did at least a draft, that he or she went off for 10 days or 2 weeks and wrote the initial draft that everything was based off of. Maybe they wrote the outline as well that was submitted to the studio and the network to get the story approved. There's a little bit of a process to get these things approved. But to the writers, it mostly just meant money, and it still does.
Were you on set when they were filming, or did you just see it after the show was made, or were you there?
Well, on that show, generally, I mean, the stage was on the same lot where we wrote the show, and we would go back and forth to the stage to check things out. For the pilot and stuff, we had nothing else to do. The show hadn't been picked up, so we hung around on the set all day. And then once the show was, in motion and we were grinding out scripts, we spent less and less time on the set as writers. But usually, what you would do is you would send the writer whose name is on the episode to hang out on the set all day.
Okay.
So that was the usual system, unless the writer was very inexperienced or was a guest writer, that wasn't available to be there. One writer would usually spend the whole time on the set, and that was a good and a bad job, because the set worked longer hours than the writers did. I mean, usually the set was a 12-hour day, and sometimes a 14, 16-hour day if they were behind and they had to go into overtime. So, you'd have to get there at 7 a.m, and you'd be there until 10 o'clock at night if you were working the set a lot of the time. And it's boring. I mean, to be on a set all day is boring because it moves so slowly. Just the camera setups move so slowly.
Yeah.
But I was on the set a decent amount because I wrote 12 episodes. And so, and I would also cover for other writers who, had childcare issues or something and had to leave. So I would go and stay on the set because I was a young guy, I would stay on the set until midnight while somebody else went home to tuck their kids in.
Yeah.
Cool. So what was that like? Like you say it's obviously boring, but when they're like performing and stuff, like it had to be like at least fun to like watch them kind of like move around and stuff like that.
Well, especially if you care about the material and you want to make sure it gets executed well.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the problem with the dinosaurs that we discovered very quickly, and I think it especially frustrated, I think, Victor Fresco, who writes a very dry, subtle kind of comedy a lot of the time. The characters weren't very subtle. The puppets were good at big things, but they weren't really good at kind of just like a straight deadpan delivery. I mean, they got better, and the puppeteers were very skilled. But I'm saying it could be frustrating sometimes because something that was very funny in the writer's room would then lose some of its comedy in the big way that it was performed by the puppets and the Henson people. And the Henson people have a tendency to, the Muppet tradition of telling a joke and then going, ha, 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 ha afterwards and adding a lot of extra, gestures and stuff. And sometimes comedy is about economy, it's about keeping it simple. And so there was a tug of war style-wise, that made it necessary to be on the set. to say, can we get one where he doesn't, wave his arms around wildly when he says that line, or that punchline is getting ruined because he's crossing during it, he's walking on the joke, so to speak. There's certain kind of rules about comedy that sometimes it's just better if you plant your feet, you stare straight at the camera, and you say the words. And the Henson people like to ad lib, and they like to, they have a tradition of embellishing the material. So you had to kind of discourage that if you could sometimes. And that got very awkward because they were working very hard. I mean, the people in those suits and stuff were killing themselves. I remember Leaf, the guy who was inside the Robbie costume, got sick, and he vomited inside the costume with the head on.
It's so gross.
Right, and so they had to take it off and get him out of the costume, and then clean out all the vomit and air it out and wash it. I mean,
that's a rough day.
And I remember thinking at the time, well, he just made sure that nobody else is going to ever be Robbie.
Yeah,
because nobody else is going to ever want to get in that fucking suit again.
For sure.
It was brutal, and I mean, these guys, I'm surprised they're having them in lawsuits because these guys were walking around with a 40-pound computer on their heads, pressing down on their spines. Initially, if you watch the early episodes, we had a lot of smoke and fog in the kind of the primeval world, and we did that less and less as time went on, because the actors and the crew kept complaining about bronchitis and breathing problems and stuff. And they were very leery of the chemicals we were using. These hippie puppeteers, these granola heads, were very, very leery of the
soy boys.
Yeah, well, they really are. They came from a lot of the puppeteers come from that sort of Renaissance pleasure fair tradition, of dress me up and pretend, and they were not, and they were like vegetarians and whatever. They were very, they all did yoga and everything. They were very tuned into to health, and they had lots of theories and things about what was good for them and bad for them. And we were a bunch of asshole TV writers who were like, yeah, just say the fucking words. I mean, I remember I used to make the joke to my writer friends. It's like let's just let's fire this guy. He can go back to being the back end of a Chinese dragon.
It makes sense though that they would do yoga and stuff, because they had to be pretty limber, because when one of the characters falls over or something like that.
Especially Bill Beretta in the Earl costume, all the dancing, the falling, the getting back up after falling. I can't even...
Bill was a fucking hero. I mean, Bill was a fucking hero. For 3 years, that guy, he was in 80% of the show, and he killed himself. He worked his ass off. I mean, I swear to God, he had to eat 10,000 calories a day, just to maintain his body weight. It was such a fucking workout. Yeah. Bill, again, as much as I like to make fun of the Henson people, they were amazing, and they did amazing work. All of them, the kids in the suits, the Charlene and Robbie were both Ninja Turtles. They were the Leaf Tilden and Michelin Testa, I think was his name. They were two of the Ninja Turtles, so they'd come right out of those movies. Yeah. These guys worked their asses off. They worked long hours in these hot suits under very difficult situations, and they worked anonymously. They got a little credit at the end of the show. I mean, obviously, they got paid, and it was a great gig for them compared to being the back end of a Chinese dragon. But they were. From their perspective, I mean, Bill Beretta has a podcast that he does with his brother, the Beretta Brothers podcast or whatever. And, he's been featuring dinosaurs for the past few weeks, talking about that job and interviewing lots of people. And what's amusing to me is his whole perspective doesn't even acknowledge the writers. It's like the writers were like, the show was written, it's all about the culture of the stage. It's all about the technology that they work with and the people who are on the stage. I mean, that's how show business works. Is everybody, I mean, there's some guy out there somewhere who's, an agent or a manager who thinks he created dinosaurs because he put together the deal that brought Henson to Disney. Yeah. I mean, everybody in show business has their perspective that they're especially with something that's pretty good. It always has a million fathers who say, I'm the guy who created it. I mean, again, there are probably people who work on the Dinosaur Show who have no idea who I am. And yet I was there for all the episodes, and I have jokes in every single episode.
Yeah, I think we tried reaching out to Bill and we never heard anything back, but I would love to have him on the show because not only is he awesome in dinosaurs, but I know he had a big part in the Muppets, the show that they did in 2015. It was like The Office. It was like a sitcom kind of show, and I love that show so much.
Yeah, the ABC Muppet Tonight or whatever show. Yeah, Muppets whatever. Yeah, no, he's very integrated with the Muppets. He's like one of the head guys over. I mean, Brian still, I think, runs the company. Brian Henson still runs the company, I think, and does some puppeteering. But yes, but Bill is definitely, taken over the mantle for the old guard, Frank Oz and the guys that sort of started the Muppets. Yeah, and he's very much integrated. The other guy you should talk to, who I barely mentioned, who's like really a big part of this, was Kirk Thatcher. And Kirk was a guy who was associated with the Creature Shop, who was in the initial stages. He was like the main designer for Henson, and for Jim Henson, was very close to Jim, was involved when Jim died. And he designed all the characters. He designed all the family, the main characters for the show. He was the key designer, did all the initial sketches, and he would also, design. He was like the main guy who designed the world, the elements for the show. And then he went on to be a writer on the show. He stuck around and wrote the show with us, and and I think he ended up directing episodes and stuff. But Kirk is a great guy, and he just has a very storied TV career or Hollywood career, because he worked on The Empire Strikes Back. He worked for ILM for a while. He did effects and puppets and stuff for The Empire Strikes Back, and he worked on the with Leonard Nimoy on one of the Star Trek movies, and he's just a guy who has been on the fringes of every aspect of sci-fi movies and television for 35 years.
Yeah,
great guy, very creative.
I would love to. Now that you mentioned that Bill has been talking about dinosaurs on his show, that sounds awesome. We should probably
check it out. The Beretta Brothers podcast, whatever. The Bill and his brother. Yeah, we did like a reunion thing like a month ago, or there's maybe longer, like 6 weeks ago, where again a bunch of us went on there with him, and he did like a full hour. And Michael Jacobs, who created the show, got about 8 seconds. And Bill spent a lot of time talking to the dresser who used to help him get in and out of his costume.
Yeah.
From his point of view, that was the show.
Yeah, exactly.
And he barely had any contact with the people who sort of wrote the show and fought the battles with the studio and the network.
I'm gonna look up contact info for Kirk Thatcher though. I remember watching the DVD bonus features, and there were like interviews with Kirk Thatcher about character design in those, and those were really entertaining and interesting.
Yeah, he's a really good guy. One of my, still one of my closest friends. I mean, it's been more than 30 years now since I started working on this show, and for whatever reason, Kirk and Rob Yulin and Victor Fresco are 3 of my closest friends in this business. I mean, I've worked on 40 other shows in the time since, and I've made friends along the way. But I'm going to have dinner, a virtual dinner with Rob and Victor next week. Awesome. Because it was just this key time in all our careers, and the dinosaurs experience was just kind of unique and stuff. Victor was the first to leave. He went off to do, I think, Evening Shade or some show, but and then Rob went off to run Roseanne, and he hired me onto Roseanne. But we stayed pretty tight, at least those 3, and I see the other folks, a decent amount too.
When you mentioned it earlier about how people a lot do like op-eds or videos about the final episode. When you guys kind of knew that everything was wrapping up, was that like your initial thought? Like, how are we gonna like essentially kill off these characters, or
yeah, I mean, it was always baked into the show, from that initial concept that I think Jim Henson stole from Gary Larson. It was always baked into the show that the dinosaurs we're going to die in an ice age.
Yeah.
You know,
It was first episode. There was a reference. Robbie asked why they're counting down to 6. Like, it's like, why are we counting down every year? Like, what are we counting down to?
It's 60 million years BC or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, why are we going backwards? What happens at 0? Or whatever. But it was always sort of felt like it was the concept of the show that they destroyed their own world, and it only became a question of whether we should do that, and if the network would let us do that. And again, I don't think Michael was very enthusiastic about doing it, and not for any sort of like, oh, we have to protect the children kind of perspective, although that might have been there. But it was more like, well, wait a minute, do we want to kill the show? What if we get a Christmas special? What if they want to bring us back, in 2 years, or something? Let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. But I think ultimately it felt right to do something very final and to kind of just grind home our lefty environmentalism as hard as we could on the way out the door, and give a little fuck you to Disney or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, although I'm not sure if it felt that way to them, but yeah, we did something, and again, I'm glad we did, because it's one of the most commented upon aspects of dinosaurs is the way we went out. I mean, very few shows get to do a definitive final episode. You just do TV and you finish your season and you hope that you get called and that they ask you to come back and do another season.
Yeah.
And we knew for sure, the show was so expensive to produce, and even though we were doing okay, ABC and Disney, they could put on another Urkel for half of what they were paying for this show. And so why continue to spend, I don't know, whatever, $2.5 million an episode for this show when they could do a sitcom for $1.1 million, a multicam sitcom for $1.1 million that would get the same rating number for TGIF. So we very sort of practically planned to do 65 episodes, because 65 is a cycle of 13 weeks, 5 days a week. So it's people talk about like, oh, you need 100 for syndication, but especially for children's shows, if you look at Disney Channel or something like that, they'll basically order 65 episodes to run on on Nickelodeon or Disney Channel. I think they used to have a rule at Disney Channel that no show got more than 65 episodes. They would build their contracts that way, and because again, it's like that way you can do it Monday through Friday for 13 weeks. And then you and then you rerun it over again, and kids, and that's what everyone has decided kids can tolerate, so that, and 13 weeks times 4 gives you a full year, blah, 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 that's how it works. So they planned to do 65 episodes. And at a certain point, they gave us the bad news that we weren't going to go past that. And so we pushed the button and said, okay, well, let's blow the world up then.
Yeah. I had seen that episode aired before some of the other episodes from that season, though. I was looking at, I think Charlene's Flat World being one of them. Like, they aired the episode of The Family Die, and they're like, well, here's some other episodes that didn't get aired also, which is
very
weird.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly what happened at the time. I think it was again, I thought it was the last one that actually aired in primetime, and that there were some other episodes that got held and that Disney then burned off, or ABC then burned off over the summer or something.
Yeah. That's what I read about.
I think that's probably what happened, was that, that again, I'd have to look at the calendar on it, but that it aired in April or something. And that was the season finale, the series finale. But then they had 4 more episodes that they held off and that they put on later. And so if you go to the Disney Plus website, it's in the middle of the 4th season.
They reorganized the whole thing.
It's weird. It's really weird.
Because the DVD releases, it has the first season ends with was it Howling, or is it it's just 5 episodes, and then the second season starts with the golden child on the DVD run, and I assume that's what's listed on Wikipedia too. But then in Disney Plus, the first season's 13 episodes and ends with the clip show, which is originally episode 16 of second season or something like that. So it's really weird. They reorganized it a little bit.
There were probably clips in that clip show that aren't
that hadn't happened yet.
13 episodes.
Yeah, that's why it's so weird.
again,
It's very weird.
these people are not scientists. You know, they are just a guy with a job over at Disney. You know, and they organize things in a haphazard way, and they don't always put their best foot forward. As I say, it's like they could probably have spent some money and remastered all of these and made them look really good.
Yeah.
And instead they look a little shitty, you know, but I mean, I'm just grateful that they're airing them. I mean,
yeah,
I will get a few pennies in the mail for this show.
That's good.
Yeah, you know, and I like the fact that it continues to live on.
Yeah, no, it's a great show. Like, it holds up. I like, Tim getting me into it. We started recording the podcast, I think March last year.
It's going to be almost a year soon.
Yeah, but we didn't start airing them, I think, until like close to October last year, because we had like to wait for our theme song to be made, and like our theme song is like a punk ska cover of the theme song to Dinosaurs. It's just like heavier sounding.
Well, I'll definitely have to check you out, especially whenever this episode of your podcast airs. Send me a link or whatever.
Oh yeah, for sure. It should be a few
hear
weeks
how
from
badly
now.
I came off.
Yeah,
I'll hear my nasal voice saying, 50 times.
We're a little bit ahead, like as far as our recording goes, but it is funny though. We talk about that clip show. Originally, I was like, I don't want to do an episode about the clip show, and then we watched it. I was like, damn, this is actually pretty funny on its own. Like, I never like
it's the archaeologist, the paleontologist one. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah,
Paxton Whitehead, the great British actor Paxton Whitehead. No, we wrote a lot. Yeah, we wrote funny stuff for that. I mean, again, everything we did was like, okay, Golden Girls will do a clip show every season to save money. I mean, clip shows are basically there to save money, because the production is so limited. You're basically, 80% of the show is old clips, and you have to do a wraparound. And every cheap ass sitcom in the 80s and 90s did them, and it was always just a way to save money for production. And Disney, that was footing the bill, demanded that we do like a clip show like every season or something on the show. So but we decided, okay, well, we're not going to be lazy. We're going to write the hell out of it. We're going to write a funny clip show that amuses us. And I think we did at least 2 clip shows, and they're both, I think, pretty good.
Yeah.
There's
it was better than I thought it was going to be, for sure.
There's like lists of like good, like it's featured in a lot of lists of like good clip shows from sitcoms as Dinosaurs, like as number 1 in a couple lists I've read, because it's one of the first, like, I can't find an earlier example of one that had a satirical take on being a clip show in and of itself. It was like around, like, I think it was even a year before Simpsons had their first joke clip show. Like, it was like, I don't know. It was pretty good timing, and like having the whole, like, the world of the paleontologists reflect the dinosaurs world instead of what dinosaurs we know of. Like, there was a TV they found and they threw it back in the hole because they didn't want to think about it.
Yeah.
It's very good.
Again, I for somebody who was brand new to television, who had never worked in this world before, I came out of the gate basically wanting to bite the hand that feeds me. Just basically saying, "Fuck you, television. You're so stupid for giving me money."
Yeah, we joke about that a lot, because it's always funny when there's TV shows that have an episode about how TV is evil or bad for you. We're just like, and who's telling us this?
And I wrote that nonstop. I mean, I also did the Network Genius episode where Earl takes over the network.
It's incredible. That episode is incredible.
And the whole joy of that was to make fun of our bosses. All the names in those episodes and stuff were the people who were giving us notes at ABC and
the Antediluvian Broadcasting Company.
Yeah, but I mean, we did all that. I mean, I do think it is a credit to the show that we weren't lazy. We kept writing things. We tried to make things better, and we'd even go down on the set and try, as I say, and hang out. And if something wasn't funny, we would try to fix it. We would try to come up with something better to keep the show good. Years later, I ran the Ellen Show during its final, super gay season. And we did a final episode that was like a clip show. We did a clip show parody on the Ellen Show, which was like clips, but they were clips that, and I wrote it, and I won a Writers Guild Award for it. Awesome. But we invented clips that never happened. From Ellen's long and illustrious career in show business. And we did an hour-long special with fake clips. That was our version. which actually ended up costing much more than a normal episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As opposed to the original premise, which was, oh, you guys have to do a clip show on the Ellen Show to save money. And we were like, okay. And then we wasted all their money doing an insanely elaborate clip show.
Yeah, that I mean, that kind of became a feature later in like shows like Arrested Development. At the end of each episode, there's like next time on Arrested Development, and then those clips don't occur on the next episode.
No.
But like the first time I watched a show, I skipped that at the end because I thought it was literally going to be spoilers. And then my second watch through, I was like, oh shit, I missed out on so many good jokes. Like, but I love that concept of creating the clips as it happens. Like.
Yeah, again, this was a generation of TV writers who were reacting to the Cosby Show and Family Matters and sort of the feel good shows that we'd been watching for the previous generation. I mean, every generation sort of thumbs its nose at the people who wrote before. Now the TV business is moving on again, and I'm sure people look at the stuff that I've done as insanely hacky. And and they look at my credits, they're like, oh please, you wrote on Roseanne, that show sucks, whatever. And that's fine. I mean, everybody can kind of everybody can kind of think that way, but I still think TV wants to be funny, wants to be as funny as it can be. I mean, I do sort of look at a lot of what the comedy that's on today, and it's not funny enough. And I wish they worked a little harder at making it funny. It seems to be enough that a show sort of has good intentions and likable characters and projects a certain kind of energy and warmth, and that's like, oh, that's it's a half hour long, so it must be a comedy. I like to tune into a comedy that actually makes me laugh a little bit. And that's sort of one of the things that sort of sets me off as an old timer now in this business, because there's an awful lot of what I've described as very soft comedy out there that people like. I mean, I like Schitt's Creek. It's fine, but it's not. I'm not holding my belly laughing hard at it. I don't know. I mean, again, I'm here to rag on other people's shows, but I mean, even Ted Lasso, that everybody really loves Ted Lasso, and it's like, it's a very nice show. It's a nice show about nice people. I come from the background of comedy where if you're not screaming in each other's faces, you're not trying.
Yeah, I think I remember. I never watched that show, New Girl, and I was like, someone had an episode on, and I was like, is this show supposed to be funny? I didn't know. I was like, could someone explain it to me? There's currently sort of an aversion to like jokes for jokes' sake, which is sort of like, oh, jokes are cheap. It's like, well, you say that because you don't know how to write them.
Yeah, if you don't write a good joke. Yeah, New Girl felt to me, I was like, I feel like I'm watching It's Always Sunny, but they are not making jokes at all, and nobody's. It's like It's Always Sunny. There's like a hostile environment between the characters that makes like there's constantly just funny stuff happening,
and they're all shitty people.
So Always Sunny is really good. I mean, look, there's room in the world of entertainment for all manner of stuff, but I'm just saying my personal taste is for shows like 30 Rock or something where there's just tons of hard laughs, where the concept of the show has funny built into it. That the idea of the episode itself is inherently funny, and then on a moment-to-moment basis, people are saying things that are extremely funny, in character and all that. They're not just sort of doing knock-knock jokes, but but they're and I like that model for TV, and I find especially in the streaming world that I find myself sometimes watching something that's being touted as a comedy and saying, what makes this a comedy other than the fact that it's 20 minutes long? It's a nice show. But people, I think there's different tastes. I mean, people like spending pleasant time with pleasant people.
Yeah.
Again, my wife's a big fan of Parks and Rec, and I would scratch my head, kind of go, it's okay, and I appreciate it, but I wasn't laughing my butt off.
I rarely laugh out loud at Parks and Rec. That's the show that I was thinking in my head. I was like, it's like a nice show. Like I could watch it, and sometimes there will be like a really funny moment or like something really clever will happen, but it feels more like a feel good show to me.
But it's like people. I think people younger than me. I think a lot of the time they want a more comfortable world. They don't want a lot of conflict. I think people. It's like it's part of what we're dealing with now in terms of. what people on the right call cancel culture or whatever. There's an aversion to conflict. Like conflict is inherently rude. Disagreeing with somebody is mean, or whatever. And and I was taught in my writing classes and Aristotle and all of that stuff that conflict is the soul of storytelling. That somebody wants something, somebody else, and the stronger the feelings are, the more likely you are, especially in comedy, to get some juice out of it.
Yeah.
I'm less interested in a mild show where everyone's getting along. That, and I find that frustrating that the style has shifted a lot toward that now. And also that seems to be like what our bosses want us to generate. So, I'm going to kind of stick to my guns and continue to write insanely funny stuff. The Kids Are All Right was a very densely written show with a lot of jokes and a lot of comedy, character comedy, story comedy. We had our soft moments, but again, ABC never gave us notes about make the show funnier. The notes were always, more warmth, more love, kissy kiss, hug bullshit.
They all want you to cry. They want everyone to cry.
Especially a period piece in the 70s, there's going to be that awkwardness between the parents and the kids where they're like not saying I love you as much. Like that's just a thing that's generational. That's how it was. Like even like growing up in the 90s, there was a lot of that still. I feel like it's different now, but like it'd be weird if in every episode it was just different. It just it wouldn't reflect reality.
No, and it was a point of interest to show the differences, to show like, the parents barely knew where the kids were during the course of the day. The kids were roaming the streets, haphazardly, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's fine and everything. I've had a storied and insanely lucky career, for 30 years doing this work. And I've got very little to complain about, but I still have a lot of fire in my belly to do TV. And I want to try to, do TV that's interesting to me, as opposed to, I'm not going to be that helpful on a very soft show.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the guy who comes in with what Kirk Thatcher used to call twirly woo, which is just the idea that blows your brain out of its head. I'm going to show up with twirly woo. I'm going to show up with something that's like, okay, now stay with me here. What if he kills his kid?
That's why I like it.
How every parent says, I'm going to strangle you. And you say, what if he actually strangles him? And where would that take our series?
Yeah, The Kids Are All Right felt like when I was watching it, immediately I got vibes of like a middle ground between like Malcolm in the Middle and The Wonder Years. Like it kind of has the vibe of both those shows in a really good way. And like I think the zaniness, like the character Joey, I believe it is, the blonde kid. Yeah, just like the things that are happening in the background of the episodes because of the deals he's making. There's the whole Godfather parody episode. Like, it's very good.
Yeah, no, it's a really good show, and I'm very grateful. We got to do 23 of them, and it's on Hulu now, and people are continuing to watch it. But I would have liked to have done 100 episodes of it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I got other irons in the fire.
Good.
I'm probably going to have to go in a minute. We've been for a while.
Oh yeah.
Do you guys have any final thing you want to ask me about?
I have, unless Tim has one, I have a couple things I was going to try to get through real quick.
I'm good, yeah.
Was there any manner of like a show Bible when writing the dinosaurs? Like something like, because some shows, especially like they'll have a thing where there's a character sheet and once there's a fact established, they'll have to keep that fact. But it like seems like it might sometimes is a little bit looser, which you have when you got a lot of people in the writing room. But
no, I'm sure that the writer's assistant generated something like that.
Yeah.
There's a writer, one of the writer's assistants on the show, a guy named Rich, I'm still in contact with. He probably has that under his bed somewhere. Wow. A 3-ring binder that has like, in episode 4, Charlene indicated that she needs to wear glasses, but then she gets contact lenses. So, there's always people who make those notations. It's one of the pieces of busy work that you give to writers' assistants during downtime is to sort of, annotate all of the confirmed events for the show. And then there's always somebody on the staff who says, wait a minute, we can't say that Earl was born in January because he was actually born in October.
That's me on the podcast because I take very extensive notes when we're watching
Yeah.
the show. So I'm always like, well, this doesn't make sense because like the baby's birthday should be before Halloween or something like that. Like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's a
And,
sitcom.
and listen, and if it's possible, you try to, deal with those things. But if it gets in the way of something super funny, you just kind of blow it off. And the expression in the writer's room is like, "I'll answer the letters," which somebody always says. It's like, wait a minute, we said before that this doesn't happen. It's like, I'll answer the letters. Don't worry about it.
Another thing,
it's like a continuity. Like I know. I'm a big wrestling fan, and they have to hire people for continuity because sometimes in wrestling, like some storyline will happen, and then like next week it'll just be like, whatever.
I just forgot about it.
Yeah. So they like literally have to hire someone to be like, no, guys, look, this guy did this last week, so
it's gonna bug somebody. We try not to bug people, especially if people are loyal enough to actually remember things.
Yeah. The other thing I was gonna say, if there were a concept, do you have a concept for what a reboot of dinosaurs would look like, whether it'd be like a prequel or like different characters entirely, or maybe they find a frozen chunk of ice with dinosaurs in it and they thaw it out and now Earl has to live in 2021 or something like that? Like we've thought about like what a reboot would look like, and
well, first of all, yes, it's not my show. I don't know, but Michael Jacobs actually contacted me and Rob and Victor Fresco a few months ago, saying we're bringing the show back onto Disney Plus, and he was talking with Brian Henson about rebooting the show, and he wanted to know if he rebooted the show, if each of us would write in one of the initial episodes. And I said, sure, if I'm available, I'll do it. I didn't.
Well, we're available.
If you want some spec scripts, we'll send some.
I haven't heard anything from him since. That was probably in like July or something.
Yeah.
When he contacted us. But I think there's some talk. If the show, it's part of why I've been kind of pushing the show, because I wouldn't mind seeing the show come back. And, they would definitely do it with CG now. They would never do the thing with the dinosaur suits. But I would hope that they would do CG in a way that replicated the look very well.
Yeah, like Dark Crystal had to do a little CG, right? Dark Crystal series, I believe, like the way they did it was with CG. The
reboot of Dark Crystal?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure they would. I'm sure that's how they would do it.
It had a little bit of it. There were a lot of puppets, but I think they ran into kind of the dinosaur problem where it was too expensive for Netflix. I think that's what happened.
Yeah, it's a crazy technology. I mean, it's one of those. What we did was like an interim technology. It was sort of like Betamax or something.
Yeah.
It was cool and it worked, but it wasn't sustainable.
No.
Nobody has done anything since then. And when they rebooted the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they just did them CG.
Yeah.
So I would not be surprised if the show comes back in some form.
Awesome.
And I would be delighted if I'm available to participate to some extent. If Michael will have me. But anyway, we should probably wrap it up.
Yeah.
I do have another thing I have to do.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. And
but we can. I mean, again, if you guys want to talk again, I'm fine. I'm basically sitting on my ass here. I'm not venturing out of the house because I don't want to. I mean, I don't want to get sick, so I am hiding at home.
Yeah, smart.
and will be until I get 2 shots, and then maybe I'll go out and look for real work.
Yeah, I was gonna say it'd be great to bring you back specifically for one of our regular episodes where we'll review an episode play by play. That'd be
when you hit one that has my name on it, let me know and I'll come back.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. As you can tell, I do not mind talking.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you.
It was really cool talking to you. Thanks for indulging us.
Yeah.
Okay, take care.
I hope you have a great weekend. See you later.
Same to you.
All right.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Hey, welcome to the outro of the episode. I don't know how else to do it.
Here we are. We time traveled.
Do you feel older, wiser, juicier?
I do.
Details?
Also, I realized a question that I really wanted to ask Tim.
He is not single. He is married.
No.
Something else. What was the question?
If we're gonna need another Timmy, like where did that come from?
It has to be his name, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. It's Timmy's voiced by, I think, Tom Tribovic, though. No. I did that. Let's erase that. Ready? Take 2. Timmy was voiced by Kirk Thatcher.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I just got that mixed up in my head for a second.
But yeah, but maybe I'll get to ask him that question, because if you were listening to the interview there, Tim has said he wants to come back and watch an episode with us. So
yeah,
that's going to be very exciting.
We're thinking we're going to do early season 3 episode Network Genius that he wrote.
Yeah.
So we're excited about that. So yeah, thanks for joining us for that interview. You know, you can check out Tim Doyle's new show, The Kids Are All Right. It's already like the whole show has run its course. It's on Hulu. It's like 23 episodes, maybe something like that. It's very good. He also has a show that he produced called Schooled that I believe might also be on Hulu, but I could be wrong about that one. And I guess what was his Twitter handle? At Flaked Informed.
Yeah, but
yeah, if you want to, I don't know if he, I don't know how if he advertises that thing or not. It's not like verified, right?
I don't know, but that is his Twitter. I mean, he's kind of a funny follow. He mostly just retweets people talking about dinosaurs, which I think is really funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been a hot item for a few weeks now.
Yeah, and if you listen to the interview, you'll learn that there's some really spicy news that Tim drops on us. So
I mean, they've already listened to it by the time we're saying this. It's really weird that we're like couching it. Like,
but if you skip the whole interview and just go straight to the outro,
that's the juiciest bits. Of
go
the
back, go back.
Marty, we need to go back
to Sarah. But yeah, thanks for hanging out with us, and thanks to Tim for hanging out with us and talking. And we will talk to you guys next week.
Yeah, which will be our episode. Next week, we're going to be dropping our episode about the episode of New Leaf from season 2.
It's about weed.
Yeah, and we're going to have our friend Justin Schaefer on for that one. And and then like the episode after that, our friend Matthew is going to be on, and we're going to talk about
Botchamina, baby.
Yeah, we're going to talk about The Last Temptation of Ethel. We already recorded that one, but we haven't recorded the weed one yet. We got it all like out of order right now, but we're going to get it done.
Yeah.
But thanks to Scott Network for making the theme song for our podcast. You can check them out on Spotify, YouTube, Patreon, etc. They're in the band We Are the Union. They have releases under Jer. You can check out Amy Shenanigans on Instagram. That's the person who did the art for our logo, other than the little creepy puppets. They did like the portraits of me and Tim. And that's everyone, right?
Oh, and Zach.
Oh yeah, Zach. Yeah, thanks, Zach, our producer, our God, our Home Depot delivery manager.
Praise be to Zach.
Praise be to Zach. And you check out Zach's band. Who remembers what they're called? Tall Tales? No, not that one anymore. Buggle Dueling Club? No, I don't think that's it. Oh yeah, Watterson. Bill Watterson, the guy who made Calvin and Hobbes. Check out Watterson on Spotify and YouTube and Bandcamp and all the things.
Yeah, that's right. And stay tuned for some gutless stuff.
Yeah, and also thanks to God. All right, we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us. We love you. Enjoy your extinction.
Goodbye.